Welcome to lesson 16 in the C# from start to finish course. My name is Tim Corey, and today we're going to continue working on the create tournament form. In the previous video, we started working the form by wiring up the lists in the dropdown. Now we get to connect our create forms to the create tournament form. So let's jump right in. Here we have our create prize button, and we have our create new, it looks like a link here, but that does the same thing only for a team instead of a prize. So these two are the first we're going to wire up, and this may seem a little intimidating because we're going to call a different form and have it talk back to us. And how you do that. And this is one of those areas where people often get it wrong, in my opinion. And that's by tying this form, the create tournament form, directly to the form we need to call. For example, the create prize form. The create prize form shouldn't know about this create tournament form. And that's where it gets a little tricky, a little bit, you have to think a little more about it before you just do something. Because there's ways to get it done, and then there's ways to get it done right. And so we're going to try and get it done right. So let's start with the create prize button. So in here, let's just list out the steps. We need to call the create prize form. All right. Next, we need to get back from the form a prize model. That's the tricky part. And then finally, we need to take that prize model and put it into our list of selected prizes. And that's the easy part. So let's start off with an easy part. Let's call the create prize form. And so these notes right here are great. They're one-liners. So I can then put code right underneath them. And then this line describes what this code down here does. So it starts off as notes of what I should do, and it ends up as notes of what I am doing for each of these sections. So to call a form, we do create prize form. Let's just call it FRM equals new prize form because it's a class, and so we have to instantiate it. So create prize form, and then it's just frm.show. And that's it. And now that form will pop up whenever we click our button. Let's just check that to make sure. If we click the button for create prize, up pops the create prize form. So that at least works. So now, how do we get it so that when that form does pop up, we fill the form in that it actually puts the prize into this list over here? So we need to pass back our prize model. And that's where the question is going to come in. So first, let's look at our prize form and just verify that when we create this prize button click, that we have a prize model that we've created, and we do. Now we haven't passed it back to itself, so let's do that. That way it has the ID back in it. So now we have the fully completed model with ID, but now what? Well, actually, before I get there, I want to point out one thing. This is actually not necessary to do. I often forget about that and just do it, but the reality is that this is, again, the address to our house. So it says, 123 Sesame Street. That's where this house lives. So in this create prize, if we look at that, and I can't go directly to it because it's an iData connection. So let's go to the SQL connector and look at the create prize. If we look here, we see that the model we take in, we then add in the ID property this value. That means that without doing anything else, we've modified this model. Therefore, we don't need to take this return value and do anything with it because we've already got it. So it's just one of those things that I often forget about it. I forget that we're passing around essentially reference types, or not quite reference types, but the address. We're passing the address around, not the actual house. So that's just something to keep in mind before we continue. But we have this model. It's now fully complete. So when we create the prize button, the next thing we want to do is send that prize model back to the caller and say, okay, here is the value, and we're done. So we're complete. So how are we going to do that? And the first way we could think about to do this is, since we have this constructor here, create prize form, we could pass in a prize model. So over here, we could pass in a prize model that we know about in this form, and then add that to our list of selected prizes. And as the user populates it and saves it, the form will just close because it's the same address again, remember, so that when the living room gets filled in the other form, the living room is filled over here because it's the same house. They're both using the same address. The problem with that is, what happens if I say, oops, I made a mistake, I don't want to create a prize? Well, then we have this weird prize with nothing in it in our list of selected prizes. Maybe right now we don't have any other location that might want to do that, but we might in the future. And especially if you're in a organization where you have a large application, you definitely don't want to lock your forms down to being so tightly coupled to each other. It's called tight coupling. And so instead you want loose coupling, the idea that they don't really know about each other, but they can work with each other. And so that's what you want, is some kind of loose coupling. So what we're going to do is, in our Tracker UI project, we're actually going to create an interface. So right-click on Tracker UI and say Add, New Item, Interface, and let's call this the iPrize Requester. Okay, remember we call it I at the beginning for interface. Make the interface public. And this is going to have just one method in it. And it's going to be a void, meaning it returns nothing. Team complete. Oops, not team complete. Prize complete. And it's going to pass in the prize model. Add the using statement for that. Model. So what does this interface do? Well, it says whoever implements this contract will have one method called prize complete that returns nothing, but that takes in a prize model. How is this helpful? Well, check this out. If I take this interface, come over to the create prize form and say, you have to pass in, let's call it caller. iPrizeRequester caller. So now it's saying someone's going to call you. We don't know who, but they will have this contract. So we'll pass it in as caller, and then up here we're going to say iPrizeRequester calling form. And then in our after initialize components, we can say calling form equals caller. So what that does is it creates a variable at the class level that stores whatever's passed in to our constructor. And why is this valuable? Well, we need to know this outside of this scope. So right now, caller is only available inside the constructor scope. But now you want to have it available in this create prize button _click event. Because what we're going to say and they said, yes, I want to create that prize. Now we can actually get rid of these. I'll comment them out for now, because we're actually going to then close our form. This dot close, which will close this current prize form, because we're done. We have said, yep, we're complete, and here is the completed value you asked for. So now we can come over to our create tournament form, and we have an error. Create prize form FRM equals new create prize form. Nope, we need to pass in iPrizeRequester. Well, we don't have one of those. Or do we? Nope, we don't. But we can say iPrizeRequester. This class is going to be our iPrizeRequester. This class being our create tournament form. We just need a control dot here and implement that interface. And now we can pass in this. Now what is this? Well, the this keyword represents this specific instance. Meaning, inside of our fully built house, we can say, I know who we are. I know where we are. And so basically we look outside the front door, we read off of the mailbox our address and hand it to you and say, this is where we're at. So this represents this specific instance. This instance being a create tournament form class, but more importantly for the create prize form, we're also an iPrizeRequester contract fulfiller. We said, yes, we'll fulfill the iPrizeRequester contract. Therefore, we can pass that into this create prize form just fine. Now, does that mean we're locked into then only this form can call create prize? No. Anything. It doesn't even have to be a form. Anything can call this create prize form as long as they implement the iPrizeRequester. Now we're loosely coupled. The prize form doesn't really know who we are. It just knows that we implement the interface. Now the create tournament form knows about the prize form because it has to know that specific instance to call. And that's okay. So now we have to actually implement this interface. So what happens when the prize is complete? Well, that's actually these two right here. So let's cut them out of here. And now really, the Create Prize button just opens up the form. And here is where the magic happens. Actually, this step is already complete. The get back from the form a prize model, that's right here. So now we just need to take that model and add it to our list. Selected prizes.add model. And the final step is then to wire up the lists again, because our list has changed and you want to see that. Now that should be everything we need to do. Let's find out if it actually works. We're going to run this. And we're going to say create prize. And that pops up our form. Let's call this prize. The place number is for 4th place, and the place name is almost bronze. The prize amount is $5. Create prize. It went away, and we have now a prize in the list called almost bronze. So that's it. We've actually accomplished our mission of wiring up this button. It really wasn't that hard. We just had to know the steps to do. And now that we know the steps to do, we can do this one much easier and much more quickly because it's the same process. So this time let's do it in a little different order. Since we know we need that interface, let's right-click on our project, and say Add New Item, Interface, and we'll call this iTeam Requester. We'll make it public. We'll add that one method to it, void team complete, team model, control dot, add the using statement. And now our interface is complete. We'll copy that and save it. And now in our create tournament form, we need to add that interface as well. And we'll control dot to implement it. Now notice that this class inherits from form. And you can only inherit from one thing. But inheritance means it brings with it the methods and properties and other public items from that form class. But then it also implements not one but 2 different interfaces. And you can implement as many interfaces as you want, because an interface doesn't actually bring in code. It just is a contract. And it says you will fulfill this contract. You can have extra stuff. And boy, do we. We have lots of extra stuff. And that's okay. We just need to at least have the items that we said we would when we said this contract is attached to this class. So we implemented iTeam Requester, but let's go down and actually wire it up, because it's pretty easy. Selected teams.add model and wire up lists. And that's it. So now this is wired up. So we can come back over here to our design, double click on the create new, to the link clicked. Notice it's a link clicked versus the click. And that's because this is a link versus a button. A little bit different, but the default event is what we wanted. So that's good. So we need to do a create teams form, frm equals new create teams form. We're going to pass in this. Now it doesn't take that yet, and that's okay. frm.show. So the last thing we need to do is modify our create team form to take in our interface caller. And we will say private iTeam requester calling form. And then after initialize components, we will say and reset the form. We can actually take that out because we are closing the form. And also we can take out this t equals, we don't need it. And instead we can say we need to call the calling form dot team complete t and then this dot close. So we called the parent and said, yep, we're done. And then we also close this form. And now if we run this, we should be able to add a team as well as adding a prize. So we have one team here, team first place. Let's add them. And now we can create a new team. And it brings up this box right here. Let's call this place the Uncanny Losers. And we only have 2 people. Let's add a member. Oops, let's remove a member. Let's add a new person. Joe Smith. Joe and Smithy.com. 555-1111. And then his brother Billy Smith. Bill at Smithy.com. 555-2222. So now we have a new team called the Uncanny Losers with Joe Smith and Billy Smith. We create that team, and there they are, Uncanny Losers. So it looks like everything is wired up the way it should be. Now we just need to wire up these delete selected. And actually, I believe the other one said remove selected. Let's check that out. The create team says remove selected. Let's keep that same syntax. So, and let's get rid of all these pins that I don't need. Let's close all documents. And open up this one. All right, so let's change this. Go to properties. And instead of delete selected, we're going to say remove. And we'll come down here and also change this language to say remove. And do the same thing down here. Change both the name and the text to say remove. And then let's double click on this one right here. And now we need to remove one from the list. Again, we've done this before. So let's go to our create team form, open it up, double click on remove selected. And here we have the remove selected member button. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to close it out. And I'm going to close out this as well. Oops, not this one. This one. And over here, I'm going to paste this in and comment it out. Again, this just gives me a pattern, so I know that, yep, I'm doing this right. And so we first need to grab not equal to null. Selected teams dot remove t. Available teams dot add t. And then wire up lists. So it really is almost exactly the same as here. It's just a little bit different in how we do it. So in this case, we have tournament teams list box and selected teams and available teams. So that's how we do the remove a selected team or player from this box. Now for the prize, and I'll do both in the same shot since they're pretty similar. I'm going to say prize model P equals prize model prize list box, prize as list box dot selected item if P does not equal null, selected prizes dot remove P, and available, we don't have an available prizes. So we can take it out of the list, but here is the one rub, the one issue. I'm not going to save this. Well, it's kind of too late. Those prizes have been deleted. Whereas if we didn't save it and we also didn't delete those prizes, then those prizes would still be there and nothing would have changed. So that could be an issue. It's definitely an issue with a text file because if we create a prize, that gets an ID of 1, we create 3 more, they get IDs of 2, 3, and 4, but then we delete those prizes. So we delete 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to add a new prize. It's going to get an ID of 2, not 5. Because it doesn't see that the max ID is actually supposed to be 5. There's nothing to tell it that. So that could be an issue if we remove something but then didn't really save the record or had some other kind of issue. And so in this case, I'm thinking that even though we may create prizes and then disconnect them from everything and they just kind of sit there, I think we should leave them where they're at and just not delete them. And so that's something you're going to weigh. But if you want to say, no, you know what, I'm going to delete it, then all you do is put that in the code right below this line. But for us, this line does all we need to do. We're not going to save anything. We're not going to save a delete or perform a delete. So now let's test to make sure this form works the way it's supposed to. Let's add a team. Let's actually add 2 teams. Notice Uncanny Losers has been saved. Let's create a prize. Prize, the place number is, let's make it a 1 and say first winner, which makes no sense, but that's okay. $100. create the prize. Now let's test removing. Let's remove uncanny losers. They go out of this list and back into this list. Let's remove the first winner. And nothing happens. And the reason why is because we didn't actually put that wire up lists after this item right here because we got distracted. And that's why it's always good to follow a pattern, because it's very easy to see what you have and have not done. So let's just test this again. Always test it again, even though you're fairly certain it's going to work. We will create the prize. Create a prize for 10, 10th place, $1. Create that prize. 10th place is in the list. Remove selected. Now nothing is in the list. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. And that wraps up all the pieces that we needed to do today. We wired up the create new link and the create prize button. Both of those add to the respective list boxes. And we also wired up the remove selected for both the team and players box and also the prizes box. Now, before we wrap up for today, there's one thing that you may have noticed, and some of you may be going crazy thinking that we've already broken our application. And that's because in the last video, we wired up the selected team, the list box for the teams, and also the prizes. And we implemented everything in SQL. But we didn't implement anything in the text files. So that was an oversight, and that's one of those things where we use that not implemented exception to our benefit in the fact that we could compile for SQL, but we never actually tested it by switching over to type text file. And if we did that, we'd get that error throw new not implemented exception. Now the good news is that no matter how far down the road we got, if we try to switch over a text, we'd get that error. So we'd know that yes, we've got a problem. So let's go ahead and actually, in this video, finish off this get team underscore all entry. And if we look up here to our create team, we see a list of team model called teams, teamfile.fullfilepath.loadfile.convert to team models. That is the code we need. We copy it, we paste it, we return it. Because this returns a list of team model, which is exactly what we need. Let's make sure that works. We'll run this, no crash, and now we have no teams. So let's create a new team. And we'll say the team name is, let's call it the best team. We'll add Joe Smith and Sue Storm, and we'll create that team. And we have the best team now in our list. We can also remove the selected, and it's now in our dropdown. Let's close this out, start it up again, and notice that our dropdown is empty. So we have some kind of issue going on, but we're not quite sure what yet. So let's do a little bit of diagnostic work as to why this isn't getting us what we need. So let's put our breakpoint on this line and run it again. And this time we break in this line, we're going to step into our code. So first we get the full file path. Then we load the file. Notice here's the file name. It reads all the lines. Then we convert to team model. And notice here's all the lines of our file. This is one line. It says ID of 1. It's called the best team with person number 1 and number 2 in the list. Great. So now we create our output model, which is empty. That's perfect. We load our people model. Let's step back out of that and step over that code. And that gives us our list of people. And we have Bob Smith, Sue Storm, and Joe Smith. Notice IDs 1 and 2 were Joe Smith and Sue Storm. So for each line in lines, we have one line. So we'll do this once. We're going to split on the comma. And now we have 3 columns. And those columns are 1, the best team, and that one pipe 2. So now we parse that int for ID. The ID is 1. The team name is the best team. That's fine. We take calls 2, which is our 1 pipe 2. We split it based on the pipe. And now we have 2 person IDs, a 1 and a 2. And we say for each string ID in person IDs, and we're going to say ID parse, and we're going to say people where x.id, that's the ID of each individual item, so 1, 2, and 3, equals the parsed value of ID, which is 1. Take the first one, add that to our team members. Let's skip over that and look at our team members. We have 1. And that first person is Joe Smith, ID of 1. That's great. And I'm going to step over this again. And what step over does is it kind of skips going into anything in this line and instead just continues on to the next line in this file. So now team members is 2. That's great. I don't have any more people. I don't have more lines. So I return our output, which is 0. Well, that doesn't seem right. Why is output 0? Well, if we look, we created this team model T, we populated it, but we never said output.add T. There's our problem. So, that's what stepping through the code does. It shows you where your problems are because you start seeing unexpected results. And that's where you start looking even heavier at what's going on. Now if we run this, it should be that if we start this, that we can go ahead and take this breakpoint off and just hit continue. Now we have in the dropdown the best team. If we add that team, it goes out of this list. And if we remove it, it goes back into this list. So now we have a working text version as well as our SQL version. All right, so that's a little bit of back work, stuff we forgot and stuff that we needed to work on making right. And that's going to happen. You're not going to get everything perfect the first time. You're not going to remember everything. And especially when you're starting off, you're going to get a lot of bugs because you forgot where you were. And you've even noticed when I've been doing this, I've had a couple bugs where I just forgot forget something. So that's what I encourage you to do. Write things down, use patterns like I've done. So in the code behind for this, we have these patterns here that I actually copy and pasted from the other form just so I could see the same pattern and do the same pattern. Because doing the same pattern every time makes it easier to spot when you've forgotten something. Like even here, it's kind of obvious to see that this pattern doesn't quite match up to this, in that I have 2 items here and only 1 here. Now it's intentional because we don't have anything to add it to, but at the same time you're going, wait, that might be an issue. And that's great. It's triggered your brain to say, I recognize this pattern and it's a little different. And so I want to make sure that that different is okay. If you didn't have this pattern, you would never look at a line of code and just go, that doesn't look right. So those patterns really help you keep yourself in line. All right, so let's review one more time to make sure we've got everything. We have wired up our dropdown and this link, these 2 buttons, these 2 lists, these 2 buttons, and now we're just waiting to wire up this create tournament button, which takes in the tournament name, the fee, and then the values for these 2 entries and saves it in the database. Now, the cool thing is we're going to do more than just save in the database this next time, because yes, we're going to save this information, but then we actually have to take this information and scaffold out our tournament. Meaning, if we have 4 teams, we have to pick which 2 play each other in each of the 2 first games. And so we have to create that list so that we can start our actual tournament, which is, it's going to be great because we actually see something working. So make sure to stick around for that. It will be a lot of fun.